I'd like to invite all of you to next Sunday's Bethel U presentation, which is titled How to Love Your Neighbor. The St. Olaf professors Doug Casson and in political science and Anthony Batista, religion, and they're both Bethel members, will discuss polarization, compromise, tolerance, and reconciliation. And these are Doug's thoughts. We live in an increasingly connected and yet bitterly divided time. Political and religious differences are fiercely debated on the national and state scenes and in our own backyards. Is the conflict and division we are experiencing a sign of partisan groups wielding power in an effort to stifle their opponents and cancel one another? Or does it represent a valuable development in our demands for moral integrity and accountability? Join in this discussion with political and religious observations on trends and where we might find resources to think about polarization, compromise, tolerance, and reconciliation. So that is for next Sunday, same time, same station. I think it'll be the same station. We're hoping it's the same Zoom numbers. So I think we'll go ahead and start. Again, mute yourselves during this part. And I'm going to introduce the panel for today. There are 4 of us, and we're all leaders of the Northfield Isaiah group. Myself, Beth from Bethel, Kathleen Doran Norton of St. Dominic, and Evelyn Burry, the United Methodist Church, and Leota Goodney from UCC, First United Church of Christ. And this is the agenda for today. At 9:45, I guess 9:50. We're already 5 minutes into it. We'll start with each of us talking about something specific to Isaiah. And then after that, we'll talk about the different issues that Isaiah is working on now. And then we'll have Q&A, questions and answers at the end of that. And that will take us probably till 10:30. And at that point, some of you will probably need to leave if you wanted to go to this, we don't call it the social, Isaiah, what do we call it? The pre-service conversations, Zoom. And if you do want to do that, just leave. You don't have to tell us about it. So during the presentation time, please use the chat for questions, and then we'll take that up later during the question time. And actually, during the question time, you can just raise your hand or wave if you want to talk. So I think that's all the rules in advance, and we'll just go ahead and start. If you don't know how to use the chat, don't worry about it. We'll take care of it during the Q&A part. So I'd like to start with a verse from Isaiah. It's chapter 58, verse 12. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets to dwell in. This is the verse that Isaiah has used since its inception in 2000 as a merger of 3 independent congregation-based community organizations in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and St. Cloud. Today, its Minnesota membership includes several, I think over 100 congregations. And I don't know if Kathleen is going to cover that part of it or not. What is involved? Maybe. It's many congregations anyway, and plus several coalitions. Basically, Isaiah is a multiracial, statewide, nonpartisan coalition of faith communities or individuals who share our faith values. We're working for racial and economic justice in Minnesota. And you can read more about what Isaiah is doing on its website, which is isaiahmn.org. You should be able to remember that. That's pretty short. And it's a little bit difficult sometimes to navigate the website, but just if you kind of play around with it, you'll find almost everything you need. Again, my name is Judy Tonoli, and I've been involved with Isaiah since before 2003. when I went to Chicago for a week-long leadership training, dragging my feet because this was really scary for me as I did not consider myself to be a leader. I still don't, but I've learned that you don't need to be a leader in the traditional sense to do important work caring for others. During monthly meetings over the years, Isaiah leaders have educated me about issues to build just communities, many of the same issues that we work with today: environment, racism, healthcare, emotional equity, immigration reform, criminal justice, affordable housing, minimum wages, hunger, wages for ag workers, land use, domestic violence, and of course, raising revenue. Over the years, we attended a hearing at the Capitol. This is in St. Paul, distributed leaflets for light rail transport, marched at the Capitol, and raised our voices at an insurance company in Eden Prairie, held candle vigils for immigration, and communicated with legislators and other political leaders. In 2009, we took an overnight bus to Washington, D.C. to march with thousands of people nationwide and to talk with Amy Klobuchar and Eric Paulson about healthcare reform. We also had big biennial Isaiah gatherings where thousands of voices were raised talking to political leaders about what we needed. We've made progress, but we still have much to do. And for me, it has become less scary. One reason I've stayed with Isaiah is that I get frustrated hearing so much complaining and condemning. I feel much better being able to do something about it, even if it seems like such a small thing. Also, I believe in Isaiah's method of getting things done, which is grassroots organizing with thousands of others in a common goal for the common good. We encourage each other, and together we make a big difference. There are other organizations which focus on one issue or another, but I like that I can be involved with any or all of the Isaiah issues that I believe are important. Most Isaiah leaders also coordinate with other organizations, which helps inform and involve all of us. I'm currently working to help Bethel Lutheran to become more aware of and more engaged in Isaiah activities. And I believe that Bethelites and need to put our faith into action to make our local community and the wider community a place where we can all thrive. So next I'd like to introduce Kathleen Doran Norton, and she is on the Isaiah board actually, and she's going to talk to us about congregations and coalitions. Go ahead, Kathleen.
Thanks, Judy. Kathleen Doran Norton. I'm a member of St. Dominic's Catholic Church, and I became involved in Isaiah because I found that the issues that Isaiah worked on were a way for me to live out the social justice teachings of the Catholic faith. The dignity of people, the call to family and community, that we have responsibilities for more than just ourselves, and particularly for the poor and vulnerable, the dignity of work and the rights of workers, solidarity, which has peace and justice intertwined, and the care for God's creation. So Isaiah has 75 dues-paying member faith institutions, but there are 200 faith communities and Islamic centers that are in partnership with Isaiah in one way or another. In 2018, at that point, 26 Islamic centers joined together, which was the first time that they had ever worked together before at all, and became involved in partnership with Isaiah. And Isaiah is pretty dynamic, and it's found a way to connect to people where they are. So there are 512 community childcare centers, that are members of Isaiah through the Kids Count on Us partnership. There are 24 Black barbershops and beauty shops. And within the African American community, barbershops and beauty shops are an important way of finding out what's going on and getting involved in the community. And so while it seems a little odd perhaps to us, that's a very important way for them to be involved. There are 11 Black faith communities that are also within the Black barbershops and beauty shops. Sometimes there are African American churches that have a barbershop within the church. So they're very connected. 40 Islamic centers participate last year. So that has grown. Isaiah has 11,000 individuals that are engaged in our programs, and 60,000 folks connect to us as supporters. And so there are waves and waves of different ways for people to connect to Isaiah. There's so many people now who believe themselves to be people of faith, but are not connected to a congregation. And there is an unaffiliated group that is being started in the Twin Cities mostly. And there's also a group of young people who are getting together and meeting in the cities. Isaiah has presence in cities across central and southern Minnesota with deep chapters, as we know, in Northfield, but also in St. Cloud and in Rochester. And so we are growing. Their other groups include the Latinx Coalition, and I think I mentioned the others. There are also faith-related groups. One Body, which is a mostly Catholic group that really focuses on issues of immigration, the Black Church Coalition, and the Sanctuary Network. There are campaigns that Isaiah has been involved with, Claiming Our Voices, Greater Than Fear, Democracy Days, and you can see events that include legislative updates, and there are particular local issues. So in Minneapolis, there's a focus on revamping the Minneapolis City Charter, which is so intertwined with public safety there. And with justice. In St. Paul, there was a town hall that was held about their Public Safety Commission. In Northfield, we have attended affordable housing meetings. There are meetings of clergy that come together. And so Isaiah is involved in a variety of different ways. And I'm going to pass it off to Evelyn now.
I'm Evelyn Burry. I'm with the United Methodist Church, and I know many of you from other things in town, but I'll be really quick. I got started really with social justice work back in my college years. I grew up in Florida, very much trying to get it so that Black college students in their university in our state and in our town that my school was in, and it was difficult, but we kept pressing on. I happened to fall in love with and marry a person becoming a United Methodist minister who had the same goals. And so we were really involved in that civil rights movement through the 50s and 60s, and then the anti-Vietnam War stuff. Well, then I got busy with kids and with work and everything and didn't do too much on social justice until I retired. And even then, not too much until the pastors at the church announced a meeting of Isaiah, possible people that might be interested at the UCC church in maybe 1915, I don't know. But I went and I said, this is something the United Methodist Church should be involved in. And I got started. Then I got a little bit older, and really then I started talking with people at church and putting things out about social justice and Isaiah things. Then, of course, the election in 2016 really stimulated some people to more activity. And based on that, there is an email list at the United Methodist Church that varies, but it goes between 35 to 45 people with whom I keep immediately introducing or emailing, saying actions needed, that kind of thing. That went on for a while. So the United Methodist Church knew about Isaiah, did a lot with Isaiah, but didn't really get to membership stage until about 2018. And at that point, it was initiated because I was the key person. I said, we really need to become members. And it took us a couple of years to get that to happen, but we've been members now for some time. And we have myself and another member who sit on the Northfield team. So why do I think it's a fit for churches? Because of its theological groundings. As Judy said, we were trying to repair the breach. And I think that what Isaiah's goals are really work toward that. First of all, it's trying to build a state where everybody thrives. It's to make the laws equitable for everybody and not favor the rich or the poor, one race or another, all those kinds of things. Secondly, it's a way for collective action. The number of people involved that Kathleen listed in so many different ways has made it the most multicultural, multiracial, most experienced, different kind of group that I have ever worked with. And it's really been very enriching to me, and I think to everybody, to build those relationships. The third thing is it gets us out of our bubbles. I sort of mentioned it that way before, but we collectively advocate and for legislation, everything else that's needed for righteousness and justice. And finally, it helps everybody become a leader. There isn't a session that I attend, a meeting, that somebody new doesn't take leadership. And so I think it's an all around, and I would strongly urge that Bethel get more involved. You do a lot already, thanks to a number of people on this screen, but it would be something to really continue. So I'm going to turn it over now to Leota so that she can tell us a little bit more about some of the issues that for the current year.
Thank you, Evelyn. I'm Leota Goodney from the First United Church of Christ in Northfield. And I got into Isaiah work back in 2009 with the passage of the Affordable Care Act. The yelling at that point around healthcare just made me really angry. And I eventually ended up with Isaiah in 2014. I am motivated, at least I'm motivated by my father's favorite Bible verse, which is from Micah. What does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love kindness and to walk humbly with your God? I think the church does really well with kindness. We know how to be good to each other. We do a lot of work helping people one way or another with food drives and support of hospitals and taking care of our members and all of that kind of thing. We do lots of holding up of individual peoples in our individual capacities or in our congregational capacities. We have a harder time with justice because justice requires that we act in the public sphere. And Isaiah is a way to act in the public sphere because Isaiah is really focused on structural change so that we have a more just society where, as Evelyn says, everyone can thrive. And so in 2021, in this legislative session, at the state level, we have had big actions on paid family leave. That is particularly important for people of color and low-income people because, as the pandemic has made clear, if you lose your job or if you have someone that's sick at home, you need to be able to take care of them. If you yourself are sick, you need to be able to take care of yourself. Another emphasis has been support for early childhood. Again, for low-income people, access to daycare and good early childhood learning is immensely important that we take care of our youngest ones. It is both a justice issue, it's an economic issue because leaving people behind because they don't have a good start in life is just economically disastrous for us as well. So that is many faceted. We've been involved with safety reform, particularly in the city of Minneapolis, but also at the state level. We've worked on environmental issues. We were advocating for 100% clean energy and soil health with our Representative Lippert. And we have also worked on broadband. The pandemic has made it clear that access to broadband is spotty across Minnesota. There are spots, not only there are spots in the cities, but there are spots across big areas across rural Minnesota that do not have good access. I was just looking at the map, and surprisingly, some of the counties in western Minnesota actually have good access because it is provided by local utility co-ops, electric co-ops, rather than a private party. So there are some counties that have really good access in the western part of the state, but there are spots in Rice County, for instance, that do not have access. And there are spots in the cities. There are places in the cities, particularly in poor neighborhoods, that do not have good access. And broadband is really an equity issue, as we've seen in the pandemic, because education is dependent on it. Small businesses are dependent on it. Medicine has become dependent on it. So access to all of those is involved with broadband. And it's really, not only is that a state level issue, but it is also a local issue. We have met with Galen Malika, our Rice County commissioner for a big chunk of Northfield, about his efforts. And there is federal money that's going to be coming in that the Rice County commissioners will be deciding about. So we hope to be involved with that discussion. As Evelyn said, that there are issues that we work on. Not only do we work on the state level, but we also work at the local level. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen to talk about some of the environmental and immigration issues that she's been working on.
Sure. So when it comes to the environment, a small group of us have been trying to create a Southern Minnesota climate table. Table is a new word for me. And it evidently means a cross-organization involvement. So this includes, this table includes the 100% campaign and Minnesota 350 and Land Stewardship Project and the Indivisibles down in Peter, Winona Can, there's a whole variety of groups. What I have seen to this point is that the emphasis on climate and renewable energy is pretty Twin Cities focused. And so for us in outstate Minnesota, or greater Minnesota, I should say, for us to talk about our perspective of climate and renewable energy is important. The other is in immigration. Last Thursday evening, the Muslim Coalition, the Sanctuary Network, and the Catholic One Body Group got together to sort of celebrate the hearing in the House for driver's licenses for all. And this continues to be an issue for folks in our own town and for folks who are undocumented throughout Minnesota. It's a safety issue. And so we continue to be involved in that. And I'll hand it over to Evelyn.
I always think, where do I unmute when it comes to my turn? But I'm going to talk just briefly about housing issues that we've done locally. We were part of the group that were trying to get affordable, accessory dwelling units in different areas. A home could have a second place in its yard. That took a lot of time getting through. Unfortunately, it has not yet yielded an accessory dwelling unit, but the place is there now when somebody wants it. There are actually 7 applications, but those have been said, first we'll make a garage, and if we need it later, we might change it into an accessory dwelling unit. We've been working also on rental issues. Part of the reason that it's hard for people to get housing in Northfield is there is a limitation on how many rentals can be on certain blocks. And so if somebody wanted to put their house up as a rental house, that limitation was full, that's it. The other thing we've been doing most recently is looking at the rental inspection ordinances, because we do have 1 or 2 landlords that do not respond when things need to be repaired in their place. We have excellent landlords in most of our places, but 1 or 2. And so the city is developing a report on that, which will be presented very soon. But the one thing I want to mention today is that there's a hearing at the HRA on Tuesday afternoon at 4:30. At that time, the HRA will be discussing money possibilities for Hillcrest Village, which is going to go out by Dairy Queen on the old Manger Inn property. It was a motel on the left-hand side as you're headed north in town. It's going to provide low-cost rental units, net zero energy use, and is also a place where supportive and emergency housing will be done. This is a CAC project. Spring Creek 2 is done mostly by Three Rivers, and it's going to be out near the soccer field. There's already Spring Creek 1, and it will provide, again, low-cost rental units. And the third place is for Habitat, where there will be 6 units for home ownership built this year. 4 of them south of the soccer fields and 2 in town, sort of adjacent to St. Peter's Church. We, a group in Isaiah, have put together a letter of support to be handed to that commission ahead of time, thanks to Leota's work. And I'd like to share it with you and see if any of you would like to join that effort. We in Isaiah Northfield want to lend our support to the efforts to provide housing that is affordable to people with low income. Isaiah works for racial and economic justice in Minnesota. Affordable housing is a basic requirement for all of us, no matter the color of our skin and our economic status. Northfield is known for its high cost of housing, which makes it particularly difficult for people with limited income to find suitable housing. Isaiah also sees environmental issues as integral to racial and economic justice, as problems in the environment also often fall most heavily on people of color and people with low incomes. Affordable utility bills, clean water, clean air, and safety from extreme weather events are a necessity for all of us. As Northfield, Isaiah, individuals who've been involved in studying and championing equity in affordable housing, we strongly endorse HRA support for these projects that will meet a deep unmet need in our community. Hillcrest Village, which I just explained, is requesting $200,000 out of, don't ask me which fund in its HRA names, but the purpose for it is to build the amount that the local area has to provide to get the other mortgage that's required. And because it's over $100,000, HRA has to approve that. Then there are various supports being asked also for Spring Creek 2 and for Habitat. So the letter is, as it says, support these projects. We're supporting them. And there's a list of us already, 6 of us. I don't know if Leota's got more names still, probably not yet. But if any of you would like to add your name to that list, Judy can forward the email to you. So could you raise your hand or somehow let Judy know? Perhaps if you are not, so we can see you, put it in chat. But if we can see you, raise your hand. Anybody want to have their, okay, Leon?
Could you also include that link on the Bethel webpage, for the Bethel U?
Polly raised her hand. Anybody else? Clark raised his finger. And I don't know what you'll be getting from the others, but if you could forward the email, you have to get your answer back to Leota today. And she'd prefer it in an email rather than just from the hand raising. Was that correct, Leota? Okay. Well,
I can put my phone number in the chat if you want to call me instead.
okay, thank you. Now we'll turn to time for questions, should you have any. I don't see anything. Oh, please explain how driver's licenses are a safety issue. We'll put that to whomever, not me, but one of the other two.
Oh, it's from me.
Sure. So, Darlene, both police officers as well as insurance companies would prefer that everyone has a license. It demonstrates that someone has passed the written test and passed the driver's test. It allows everyone on the road to be insured. And so for several reasons, it's better for all of us if everyone on the road has a license.
If people have
many of the folks,
sorry, go ahead.
If I could,
so many of the folks who live in Northfield have been here for 15, 20 years. Some of them had a license to drive before it was taken away from them. And
this is a particular issue for the people that don't have papers that say, it's legal for me to live in the US. Mm-hmm. They could get it through until about, was it 93?
No, it was later than that. It was 2000 and
Thank
something.
You.
Tim Palenti was the one that did away with that.
He just struck that because before they could have it.
Right.
Do people have to demonstrate they have insurance in order to get a license?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? My goodness.
Does the license also serve as an official ID?
Correct. And it does for many governmental reasons. And it does also say you're going to pick up your child at childcare. Maybe the unusual person. Mom calls and says, you need to pick up my child today. Well, she calls the daycare center and they say, Darlene's going to pick up. It's proof that you're Darlene. That's why several years ago, Isaiah was part of the group that created the Northfield ID. And if you go to the library and pay $15, you can get a Northfield ID, which doesn't work for government things, but does work for things like picking up childcare, getting your prescription. It's got a photo on it, so it says you are who you are, that kind of thing. Okay. That help, Darlene?
Yes, because I think there are some differences. Now, would the driver's license obviously works for flying, but the Northfield ID would not work for flying?
No, that's correct.
Okay.
The driver's license will not work for flying from September, October, unless you have an enhanced ID or a passport.
Yeah.
But it's still a driver's license, but it's enhanced, or what's the other number? Real ID.
Yeah.
What I wanted to mention was that, as you can see from all we've discussed today, Northfield works with a variety of issues and with other organizations. I mean, that's what I think is really great, is that we're not like a silo in any given issue. We go across the table. What did you call it? The table thing?
Yeah.
And I would echo that I have learned two things working with Isaiah. One is that, as Evelyn said, this is the first multiracial experience that I've had, but working statewide and even in Northfield, some of the time, it's a multiracial experience, which has been rare in my life. And the other thing is that it's shown me that all of the issues are related. If I care about healthcare, I need to care about housing, and I need to care about the environment. If I care about the environment, then I need to care about equity for in wages and economic access. And it's just everything is interconnected. So I don't feel like I have to pick one thing and just say, we got to get this done, we got to get this done, we got to get this done. Well, we do, but if something else on the table gets done, that's a really good thing. And so it makes it easier.
Leota, do you want to talk a little bit about the legislative part of Isaiah and Faith in Minnesota?
Yes, I can. I will say that, as I said, Isaiah mostly works at the systems level of working on legislation or government action to get the government to do what it needs to do. We have Isaiah is totally nonpartisan. It is faith-based. Most of so those are all 501c3s. So there are limits on what we can do in the political arena. We do have a sister organization, Faith in Minnesota, which is a 501c4, which is also nonpartisan, but that type of organization has fewer strings attached about what we can work on and the ways in which we can work. The 501c4, for instance, can advocate for particular candidates. The 501s Isaiah only advocates for issues and does not advocate for particular candidates.
Thank you for making that clear, Leota, because it is an important part. There is a chat, let's see. Gordon says, what a great organization. So glad that Bethel is a partner in this. Is there a national mother organization that Isaiah is patterned after? Well, I wanted to tell you that when I first was involved with Isaiah, there was an organization called Gamaliel that was nationwide. But since then, I think Isaiah has kind of gone more independent. And there are other organizations, I believe, that are very similar to ours. Evelyn, were you going to talk to that?
Or Kathleen would know.
Oh, okay.
We partner with people all across the country, but most of the organizations are statewide.
Sure.
Necessarily all faith-based. Now, maybe somebody else has a different answer.
Kathleen, are you frozen?
No, I think my audio is delayed, so I feel like I'm jumping over people. So I went to a convention about 3 years ago with Faith in Action, which is a national organization. I think it had its start mostly in California, but is nationwide. And there were, I don't know, a few hundred organizations that were either locally based or state-based throughout the United States that were there. Isaiah is a member of that, but it's also a member of other organizations as well. And each seems to learn from each other. I guess the other thing to say is years ago, Faith in Action and perhaps Gamaliel did training for organizers. And since then, Isaiah has done its own training and is known nationwide for the strength and depth of its training for community organizers. So you will find people in Land Stewardship Project and other nonprofits that have been trained through Isaiah's training sessions.
Yes, and in fact, I went to an Isaiah training. It's a couple of years ago, maybe as much as 3 years ago now, that was held in Chicago, that was participated in related state organizations from Illinois, Michigan, Minnesota, and Ohio. So there were 4 or 5 states there with similar organizations, and we were doing the training together under the auspices of Isaiah. And it was a very good training on organizing.
I did that also.
Hey, another thing that Isaiah has done in partnership with not community organizer organizations, but communications and research organizations to develop what's called the race class narrative, how to talk about these sorts of issues in a way that unites people across racial boundaries or religious boundaries or community boundaries, to talk about the issues in a way that brings us together. And that's been a really powerful project that Isaiah has been part of.
And those trainings are also available. I think there are a couple, I don't have the dates right in mind, but there are those trainings available over the next couple of months, a couple of them that are, I think if you go out to the Isaiah website, you will, and look around, you will find those. And I encourage you, if you are interested in how to do messaging that is positive and gets us where we need to be, is very, very helpful.
Yeah, I think I'm probably going to need to go again to refresh. It's been a while. Anyway, I did also want to mention that our I can't remember what we call her. What do we call Catherine Lozada?
Our organizer. She's on staff. Yeah, she's on staff at Isaiah.
Yeah, she works with Isaiah directly, and she organizes us all and keeps us all thinking about Isaiah at the forefront of our brains with a lot of emails and letting us know what's going on. And then she organizes our monthly meetings.
One thing I'd like to mention is you can choose how much involved you want to be. You can be like Judy and Kathleen, all four of us as presenters. We at one time or another went to one of those trainings. I went to the first one where Muslims were included, and we actually met in Rochester at that hotel because that was the only one around that could provide the food that our Muslim friends needed. But the other thing can just be raise your hand to sign your name to a letter. You know, so you can choose your amount of involvement, whether and get involved.
Right, right. So we do have also a lot of actions, and that's what I'm kind of hoping to do with Bethel is getting some kind of again, a list. And I don't know if this would be the same list of people that raised their hands today, but getting a list of people who I can email if there's some kind of an action coming up. And I'm planning to do that eventually and I'll do it through the newsletter and so forth. Well, we're past 10:30, and are there any other questions? And if not, we'll sign off for today.
Thank you all for coming. It's been good to see you all.
Okay.
Thank you to all of you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Okay. Adios.